All right, so today we are moving on. So remember, yesterday we did a little review on graphing linear equations, all right? And we did that to help us set up today for graphing linear inequalities. Okay, now, here's the big thing that I need you to understand. When you see the word inequalities, what should you think? I'm going to give you a refresher here in a second because we've done it before. They are not equal signs. Inequalities are the ones that are greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So now what we are going to do is go through on how to graph linear ones of those, okay? So let's hop over here and see. Now, before we get into it, there are a couple things that we need to know, all right? The first thing we need to know is that when you graph a linear inequality, it does not, I repeat, does not have to be a solid line, okay? What I mean by solid line is the entire line is connected. It could be what we call a dotted line, or I will refer to it as a dashed line. Anybody know why I like to call it a dashed line? Coach Dasher. Yeah, that's right, because I'm Coach Dasher. You got it. Gosh, yeah, I'm lame. Y'all know all my stuff. Okay, so here's how you know whether it is a solid or a dashed line. If you use the ones that are greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, aka they have the line underneath them, it is a solid line. If you want it to be dotted or dashed, it is just less than or greater than with no line underneath. So there's no or equal to. Okay? That is the big thing. Now, we're going to arrow over here to these next ones. Now, there is one more thing that you're going to have to do with inequalities. But before we talk about it, all right, so there's one more thing that you're going to have to do with inequalities, and that is going to be shade it. Okay, so you're going to have to color, you're going to have to shade the graph. But before we talk about how to do that, I want to go through and make sure that we can graph and decide whether something is solid or something is a dashed line, okay? All right, so here's what we're going to do. I always start by coming over here and looking at my inequality. And then out to the side, I'm going to write whether it is a dashed line or a solid line. So looking at this first one, what kind of line will we have? Yeah. The first thing I do is I come and I look at my inequality to decide if I'm going to have a dashed line or a solid line. You don't have to do anything with any of this. You just got to look at it. Is this going to equal a dashed line or a solid line? Solid line, that is correct. So this will produce a solid line. And the reason that you know that is because it's got the or equal to, the line underneath it. Now, this next part is going to deal exactly with what we were doing yesterday. Before you can graph something, okay, you have got to make sure that it is in slope-intercept form. So, what that means, you need the y by itself, some number with x, plus another number. Is this one in slope-intercept form? Yes. So guess what? To graph it, we've got to go and pull the same information that we had before. Remember, the steps to graph are you need to identify your b value, which is your y-intercept, and then you need to identify the slope. Well, what is the b value in this equation here? 3. Your b value, remember, it should be y and then mx plus b. So your b is what's by itself. What is your slope here? 1 over 2. Good. Your slope is your m value, which is with the x. 1/2. 1 over 2. Now, you have identified all the things you know to do so far. So guess what? You got to graph it. So you're going to start by putting your b value in there. So that is at positive 3. So you go up 3 on the y-axis, and there's your dot. Your slope is positive 1 over 2. So that means, remember, it is rise over run. So that means you will go up 1 over 1, 2. Up 1 over 1, 2. Up 1 over 1, 2. Now, is that the only direction we could have gone? No. Remember, if you were doing it as positive 1 over positive 2, you could flip both of them and make it negative 1 over negative 2. So you could go down 1 to the left 2. Down 1 to the left 2. Down 1 to the left 2. And those dots have created our what? Our line. Now, we said what kind of line was this? Solid. So, that means that we need to just connect it all the way through. And that would be the line our inequality makes. Okay, now, I'm going to, what's up? Correct. I'll show you how to do that. That's what our next example is. Now, do you want me to go ahead and show you the last part you have to do for an inequality with the shaded stuff? I'll show it to you in the slides coming up in a second on what it'll look like. But here's what you need to know. The last thing that has to happen is you either have to shade above or below the line. Here is why. An inequality is not an equal sign. So that means there's not just one answer that makes it true. There are multiple answers. How you denote what those multiple answers are is by choosing which area is shaded. Okay, now, here is the easiest way to think about it. You look at which direction the inequality is facing. Do you remember how we thought about the inequalities earlier as like an alligator? If you look at this inequality, would it eat the y or would it eat the 1/2 x plus 3? 1/2 x plus 3. So here's what you need to know. Whenever it faces away from the y, you always want to shade below the line. Okay, now, this one's pretty easy to see. Where is below the line? Is it here or is it here? Down here, right? It's all this stuff below. So this is where you would want to shade because it's everything below the line. Okay? So what I do is I take my highlighter, but you could take your pencil and just lightly shade that whole area. And that is what a final product would look like. Questions? Okay. If y'all don't ask questions, I know them. All right. Let's look at this next example. We're going to do it together still. I'm just going to speed up a little bit how fast we're covering it, okay? Here, what did I say I always start with? Making sure, well, one, let me back up because I told you something wrong. make sure it's in slope-intercept form. Is this in slope-intercept form? Yes, y is by itself, so it's in slope-intercept form. After you have made sure of that, let's go ahead and make sure we know whether it is dashed or solid, and if we are going to shade above or below. Okay? So, is this line going to be a dashed line or a solid line? Dashed. That is correct. You know that because this inequality does not have a line underneath it. Did I answer that question? All right, now, the next thing I do like to do is decide whether I'm going to shade above or below. Well, as I look at this inequality, would it eat the y or would it eat the 3x minus 1? If that mouth were to close and chew down on something, is it going to chew on the y or is it going to choose the 3x minus 1? The y. Whenever your inequality faces the y, you will always shade above. So just by looking at this, without doing any math, we know that it's going to be a dashed line and it's going to be shaded above. So now we've got to go ahead and graph the line. Well, to graph it, y'all know we need our b value, which is our y-intercept, and our slope. What is our b value? -1. What is our slope? 3. Remember, that's really 3 over 1. Good. All right, so I'm going to graph this. I put my first dot at -1. Slope is rise over run, so I count up 3 over 1. Up 3 over 1. Everything is in the positive direction. Are y'all good? Okay. Now, could I also go the opposite direction? Yeah, but you got to flip everything. So that means it's -3 over -1. So down 3, because that's what -3 means. And then -1 means go to the left. Down 3, -1 to the left. Questions on any of that? Now, we have to go ahead and create our line. We said we would have what kind of line here? A dashed line. So, if you put as many dots as I did, you could technically leave that. Here's what I like to do. I like to just put a dash about at every dot and then one past it on each end. So that way I can truly tell that this is a dashed line. Y'all with me? Now, this next one, it says it wants to shade above. This is some of the hardest part. This is the hardest part for a lot of students. Because if you look at this line, would you say that the above part is here, or would you say it's over here? There or here? Okay. It is not right here. It's over here. Here's how I have taught people to do it. Think about this little fella up here. If he were to go down a slide, which side would he have to go on? This side, right? Because if he went down here, where would he go? He'd go straight down. There's no slide. He's going to fall straight to the ground. But if he goes here, he can at least slide down, right? The top or above, you have to be above to slide on a slide. If you're below a slide, you just fall down. So you always want to choose the above part when it says the side you could go down. So since we are looking for above, that is what we will shade here. Questions? You good? All right. I'm going to go to the next slide. This next slide simply talks about the shading part. If it is greater than, shade above. If it is less than, shade below. So I'm going to put a little star. If it faces the Y value, you shade above. If it faces the expression, then you shade below. Typically, how I talk about it is, hey, does it face the Y or does it not face the Y? That is the verbiage you will hear me use. All right. And action. We're going to skip. Okay, so just a few more examples. These next two examples. Why? Huh? Yeah, we already did it. So these were actually the examples from before, but I went ahead and covered the shading part with you. Okay? So we're going to skip to the last example, which is the Y is greater than or equal to negative 4/5 x plus 6. Okay, so how did I say we're always going to start this? Yeah, so we're going to look at the inequality and decide, is it going to be a solid line or a dashed line? Solid. That is correct. Let me back up 1 second. It was in slope-intercept form, so we're good to go. Okay? So it will be a solid line. Are we going to shade above or below? Above. Okay? How you know you shade above? If this was to eat, think of it being Pac-Man. It would have to eat the Y. So when it eats the Y, you shade above. All right, now let's come over here. To graph it, we need our B value and we need our slope, our M value. Well, what's the B value there? 6. What is the slope? Negative 4/5. Now, could we think about the slope a different way? Perfect. Those are the two ways we want to think about it. So let's come graph it. Our B value is at 6. So it crosses the y-axis at 6 right there. Y'all good? Now, our slope is negative 4/5. Well, that means we need to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. But then you're going to go over 5 in which direction? Positive or negative? Positive. So look. Yeah, it's a positive 5. Negative 4 over positive 5. So then you count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bam. Huh? You like it so spaced out? Oh, why is it? Because your slope was bigger. Your slope had more variation. So, now we got to go finish it. We want to have a solid line. So we would connect these. Okay, and then you got to decide. It says to shade above. Well, is the top part going to be the small corner or is it going to be the big bottom? Small, that is correct. So then you've just got to take that area and shade it. Bam. Questions? All right. What we are going to do is we're going to practice with this today, and then we're going to practice it some more tomorrow as well. Okay? And maybe a third day. We will see. All right, so I'm going to pass out your homework. That is what you are in charge of doing today. Ready, set, go.